And would you include, I mean, I'll be provocative, but I mean, I want,
Mhm.
we don't have to go too much into it, but I mean, I would be curious to hear some of your thoughts on the 1619 thing, in
Uh,
light of that, if you want to touch on
right.
it briefly. But look,
Yeah.
we don't need to go too much
Yeah.
into it, but I think it's,
Right.
it tracks with some of what you're saying.
Well, no, I think it definitely does. And I mean, um, uh, it's kind of hard for me because the first sentence in the first essay is a lie, right? In 1619, 20 African slaves, the first 20 African slaves showed up in North America. The fact is, they weren't slaves. So it's time to drop the curtain, pack up the props, and go home, right?
What were they?
They were sold as indentured servants, and they served a time of indenture, and they melted into the population of, well, when they were serving it, they melted into the population of indentured servants, and then they were free, right? I mean, there's like a 50-year period, and for listeners who would be interested in this, there are two great sources. The original one is Edmund Morgan's American Slavery, American Freedom, and the newer one is my colleague Kathleen Brown's first book, Good Wives, Nasty Wenches, and Anxious Patriarchs, and that's a study. They're both studies of the emergence of race and class, and in Brown's case, also gender, as technologies of hierarchy in colonial Virginia over the 17th century. And there's like there's a good 50 to 60-year period between the time that the first Africans showed up and the time that you come out the other end of it with slavery and a racialized understanding of slavery. Like, you can watch over the course of that half or 2/3 of a century how gradually, and it's at the local court level, right? It's not big statutes of the House of Burgesses, where gradually the distinctions between slaves and indentured servants become sharpened, and the distinctions between enslaved and free blacks become compressed. And they both point out that show how this was in response to other shit that was going on in colonial Virginia that had to do with, oh my God, I don't believe it, political economy, right? The market for indentured servants from England was drying up, partly because after the first generation of Anglo-Virginians got settled in and began to see themselves not as hustlers who were getting rich to go back to England, but as a founding ruling class.
Right.
Shit got nastier and nastier. And they got more and more brutal. And the word got back to England. People said, fuck it, I'd rather go in the galleys rather than go over there, right? So,
right.
So that's already wrong, right? And I mean, the argument about, the sources of the Revolutionary War, well, it's what really, I was thinking about this earlier. If you want to identify a core problem, conceptual problem with the 1619 project, it's what Touré describes as race reductionism, right? Because that's all they see, right? I mean, so anyway.
So no, and that's interesting because even like one of the basic things that I saw that was kind of responding to it was saying, like, look, the engine of the revolution is coming from New England, which has more abolitionist politics than the South, obviously. Right. Now, the Constitution is an objectively pro-slavery document, and that's a product or
with slavery.
Yeah, it's a compromise. I mean, it allows it to go on, is what I mean, and that's a political trade-off with the coalition you're trying to build across geographies to fight the battle.
Right.
And that turns it again. And I guess the question I have for you that also is disturbing to me is, why is it like nothing that has just been said says the founding fathers were great
Right.
And what a nice thing, I mean, I remember Bill O'Reilly going, slaves should thank the Americans because they got to come. I mean, all of this, right wing, racist, American mythologizing. None of that is happening here.
No,
it's just in some ways it makes it even, it adds to the varieties of obscenity. There's the class dimension, the gender dimension, and then also just the way things work wherever they are, east, west, north, south, which is like, I'm in New England. I don't happen to like slavery, but I need to partner up for muskets and money with some guys in Virginia whose whole economy is dependent on this thing. We're going to cut a deal. That's politics.
Right. Yeah. Well, And on top of that, I mean, look at, Jim Oakes is somebody you should have on too, actually. Like his book, The Scorpion Sting, is really great on this issue, actually. Because there was, from the beginning, a separate tradition of anti-slavery constitutionalism, right? And what some of the anti-slavery founders, I'm not saying all, right? But what they thought was, okay, well, because of the deal, right, you've got to accept slavery where it exists, right? But they wanted to make sure that it couldn't expand. And the idea behind the Scorpion Sting was that if you could freeze the institution in the lower South, right, and wean away the border states, it couldn't survive and it would shrivel and die. Well, in the first place, they were too optimistic about being able to wean away the border states. But that tradition was there. What's also interesting about this, right, is, and like this, pardon me, and this connects with, soft shell crab taco is really great, but
I believe that. I'd like that now.
Yeah, but it connects with the shift from the defense of slavery as a necessary evil to the defense of slavery as a positive good that happens like in the 1830s. Because what people don't often think about is that the other thing that was happening during the 1820s and 1830s was mass enfranchisement, right? So, the emergence of universal white male suffrage, right, happens. So, say at the founding, right, you got a bunch of rich guys,
right,
sitting around a room, figuring out how to make decisions about all the rest of us, basically, about what to do with all the rest of us, slave, indenture, free, like whatever. And we're basically coming out of an historical context in which the distinction between slave and free was one that had a bunch of shit in the middle, right? So it wasn't quite as sharp. And in 1789 or 3 or 76 or 1800, Jefferson and Madison and Patrick Henry, Robert and all the rest of them could say, and Pinckney and anybody else you can think of in South Carolina could say, look, man, I know that this institution is really ultimately kind of fucked up, but I got to get paid, right? I got to make my money. I need it. Well, so by the late 1830s, you got all these broke white guys out there voting. And the argument that, well, we need to support slavery because I got to keep making my money doesn't work quite as well, right?
Right.
And this is at the same time that, scientific racism is starting to take shape and whatever. But so, I mean, there's like a complex social and cultural and ideological dialectic that's playing out. And between, I tell you, it's a great book on this. Johnson and Rourke's Black Masters, which is a study of a slave-owning family in South Carolina, antebellum period, obviously. And one of the nice things about it is that they show how after the nullification crisis, the South Carolina elite starts thinking more and more that the secession might actually be on the table at some point. The white yeoman and working class population is starting to grow in the state, with people coming in from outside the country too. And what you see is them pretty self-consciously appealing to these working class white people and to the artisans on the basis of racial identity, right? And even as those motherfuckers were complaining about competition from the free blacks and the slaves in Charleston who actually could rent out some of their own labor to some extent. And you can see them, right, self-consciously producing something called an identity as white men to get ready for secession, right?
Right. So what's so troubling?
It's politics that's doing all this, right? Sorry.
No, that's great. No, because it isn't the idea that by complicating these things and talking about all the variables, you're taking away any of the moral punch is a problem for analysis. And then I guess, the question then becomes in 2020, not a project that took these things on, including obviously the racial dimension, but all of the dimensions, or maybe even just the racial dimension, but actually said, we're focusing on this facet of it. Not that this is the single explanatory variable for everything. Right. And I guess, and I think the stake of it, I mean, I guess if I read you correctly, is that the stake of it practically in 2020 then becomes, if we get back to making this stuff just metaphysics, then again, where do we go? Right. Where do we go politically? What's to be done with that?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, could Stacey Abrams be the vice president? I mean, who gives a fuck ultimately? Right?
I don't think she's. I think she's too thirsty in self-promotion.
No. Look, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
No, totally. And that's one of the first things I learned in the faculty at Yale is that if you want tenure, well, in the first place, you're crazy to want it, right? Because it's not likely to happen. But if you want it, the absolute worst thing you can do is show that you want it.
Oh man, she is. I'm amazed, honestly, watching Stacey Abrams specifically, because everybody else that is in contention, Harris and Whitmer and they're all doing like the standard, I would be honored, but the focus is the election, yada yada yada.
Right.
Stacey Abrams is out there like I don't know. I've never seen anything like it actually.
No, I haven't either. And it's the vice presidency. You know what I mean? Now, but I'm wondering whether she thinks that she can create such an embarrassing situation that Biden feels like he'd have to do it, and that's all I can figure. But I mean, she could, and
like elder abuse.
Yeah, right. Probably can browbeat him, man. But yeah, it's nuts. I mean, and like from what I understand, she makes good money off those soft porn novels that she writes. So why not just go right into the sunset? Because I think she's got like a TV movie deal, like for one of them.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more fun than being Joe Biden's vice president. I don't know about her. David and Matt are into her books. I know less about them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I've just seen that.
Adolph Reed, I mean, we'll obviously have you back on again real soon. Just always such a pleasure.
And man, so thank you. A lot of fun. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
All right, brother. Take care, man.
All right, be well, brother. Thank you.
Yep.
You just watched a Michael Brooks Show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.